All right, let's run this again, shall we? So, yeah. Oh, an anonymous subject here, and I'll light up a little bit. Pause for a little bit. And, so yeah, we're here talking about it. All right, so let me give a little bit of background on my career, particularly starting with the intelligence side of things. And that is an extremely broad category, and probably not what most of you, or at least a lot of you, have in mind. It is not going to be, necessarily, cloak and dagger or anything of those sorts. Now, I'm not saying that those things don't happen or those things don't exist. They certainly do. Now, is it going to be, high tech, high speed? You're wearing all this kit and you're doing all these badass kung fu moves or, shooting people from a mile away? Not really, no. Does it happen? Yeah, absolutely. Now, I want to say that intelligence asset and intelligence agent are two very different terms. So, an asset is an extremely broad category. An asset is pretty much anyone that's considered useful, which, and if you ask me, and you ask a lot of us, everyone has a purpose in this world. Everything in this world has a purpose and a use to it. So with that being said, I would claim that just about every single person in the world is an intelligence asset. And that's also the way you have to look at things. So the way you look at things is, well, first you will look at it through the lens of the world. The universe always takes the path of least resistance. That's how it always, at least matter. Matter takes the path of least resistance. That includes light. You take light, you shine it through a prism or a diamond, you get your rainbow, right? You shine it through some kind of, refractive index. Certain ones, you get a laser or a ruby or whatever. You get a rainbow, your little lasers, your UV, IR, all that good stuff. So that's, that is ultimately what it is. And that's the mindset that you have to have going into these kind of things. You can't have the mindset of being a vigilante or you're out for justice or whatever. Because the first thing you're going to learn very quickly in any kind of work that involves secrecy or intelligence is, there's always that saying that, in order to keep a secret between three people, two of them have to be dead. So, with that being said, it was something along those lines. Look, I'm not the best talker in the world. However, I would claim that with the secrecy comes loyalty. Loyalty is going to come first and foremost. And loyalty means, hey, you know what? you're gonna have to do some fucked up shit to save somebody, to finish your mission. So if that means, hey, I have to go, kill a child, fuck somebody up, hurt an innocent person, then so be it. And mind you, in the line of work of having to work with any kind of, you know, extremely exclusive organization, innocent people are going to fall by the wayside. That's just the nature of it. You work in the drug business, are you going to screw over some, people that, you really can't think of a reason for why they would deserve to get, screwed up or to get fucked over on a deal. Maybe, you have to rip them off or whatever. It happens. You might sell something that's cut. You might do whatever. And that is part of the reason why, say here in the United States and much of the Western world, we like to have immigrants. Because in a lot of these ethnic communities, especially in a lot of these religious cult-like communities, you know, they have a strong sense of community with one another. And they're not very atomized. Not like here in the West, or especially in the United States. So here in the United States, you'll notice that a lot of, with a less of better word, I'll say double eagle and, twisted cross kind of gangs, your ABs, your, and sort of the other things, they care more about justice and honor than loyalty. And you see it all the time. This is a thing. And that's why a lot of these organizations, they fail and they fail miserably. And that's why they have to rely on all this just, whack ass propaganda to keep their little machine running. That's why they spend so much money and have to invest so heavily into sort of this propaganda machine, to create an image that's not even real, to advertise something that's so far from the truth. And so what you see instead of, this sort of, I guess what you call the reality of it, you see some kind of glamorous image. And, you're going to have the people that are sort of the group thinkers. They're going to fall right for it. And then you're going to have sort of, I want to call it the big group thinkers. The big group thinkers are the people that wholeheartedly believe in sort of whatever the mainstream consensus idea is. And they will fight for and sort of defend those mainstream ideas with a passion. They will defend it with their honor, and they will defend the honor and justice of it. To the point of being how do I say it, rather, they're willing to screw each other over for a misplaced sense of justice. And, I'm not here to criticize them. I'm not here at all. But what you also see is you have these other people. I want to call them, they're sort of the exclusivists. They want to be in something that's exclusive, and they want to be sort of part of this elite group. And, for a wide variety of reasons. Some people, they're just, narcissistic or whatever. And some people, they do like the idea of being part of a group where, hey, we're going to have each other's backs. We're going to have each other's backs no matter what. And that oftentimes entails, um, you know, avoiding accountability. That's the nature of it. Not only avoiding your own accountability, but, protecting others from accountability as well. And, you know, I think for, certain religious organizations, particularly with, that stress the importance of forgiveness, of turning the other cheek, or, say oftentimes in Judaism, there's a clear distinction between retribution and restitution. Have you ever heard the term the eye for an eye? Eye for an eye, it's to be interpreted different ways. But I think the most, you could say the most consensus is sort of, vengeance. That's sort of the mainstream consensus. But I guess you could say I don't know what you call it, the other interpretation. The more scholarly interpretation is simply restitution, right? So if I borrow $100 from somebody, if I borrow $100 from somebody, with interest or whatever, well, then I would, you can pay them back $100, right? And likewise, whatever interest, because, time is money. Because if, say, I give someone $100, if I loan them $100, and that's $100 that I don't have at that exact moment. I don't have that $100 anymore for that moment. I may not have that $100 for maybe another month, maybe another 2 months. Could even be years before I have that $100. Is that $100 going to be worth less in 2 years? Is there going, to be some kind of major expense within the next 2 years that, not having that $100 could end up costing me more later on? Which I think a lot of us, we know about. It's a very simple concept of, the concept of efficiency. And that this also applies to economics, but also to social organizations. So you can say that small organizations usually don't have as much efficiency. They don't. They simply don't have the scale of being able to operate efficiently. Whereas if an organization is too large, it's just too large to manage. It can't operate efficiently for that reason as well. And it becomes a bit more sensitive. And this also comes with cohesion and loyalty. That when an organization is, it's too big, you sort of have a lot of these divisions. And when an organization is too small, they simply don't really have the means of creating any kind of buffer, any kind of shield. And there's not much of a place to even build trust to begin with. If say I'm talking to somebody, I said, oh, well, I believe such and such, and the other person might just say whatever to agree with the other person, right? Whereas if, say, you have a group where it's like, hey, you know what, between you and I don't really care. Oh, yeah, same thing between you and I don't really care. And if you have, say, some kind of text that clearly outlines that, some certain non-mainstream behavior is totally okay, then yeah, I guess that would be different. However, that's sort of about it. So now on to, I guess you could say, the technical aspects of working in the field of intelligence. This, I guess you could say, technical, psychological aspects. So one thing I have noticed, this is not just generalization. This is a very common thing. I've noticed that usually people that have sort of, the badass tough guy persona, hard ass, no nonsense, no bullshit, that kind of persona, are usually the most, just honest with you, the most sensitive, whiny ass little bitches I've ever seen. If I see a guy with, I don't know, a Punisher skull, you know, whether that's velcroed onto his plate carrier, tattooed onto, a very visible part of his body. I don't know, he's got a little swastika, double eagle, whatever. It shows me that not only is this person extremely expressive, um, very, very expressive, to the point of being needlessly expressive, possibly. But that the person is also, you can say, they're very vindictive. They feel the need to constantly bring upon justice. They feel the need to, I guess you could say, push their beliefs and morals onto everyone else. And those are the kind of people that we typically don't want in an organization. We just don't want them in some kind of exclusive organization, given that these people are usually a bit more on the, I guess you could say, on the more sensitive side. They're going to be too sensitive. I'm not saying these people are bad, right? I'm under the belief that every single person, you can think of the world as sort of like a machine, right? And every little plant, animal, person, rock, stream, I don't know, whatever, proton of whatever, I don't know, some alpha particle, beta particle, whatever, gamma ray, just, I don't know, floating through the sky. It's part of a machine. And so, particularly in Hermeticism, now this is a bit off, but, religious organizations are usually a very, kind of a strong, good place for this kind of stuff to start. Because now you can simply use loyalty. I was like, oh, well, the scripture says this and this, or the tradition says this and this, so we're just gonna have to let it pass, right? Even if it weren't for this religion or whatnot, you would totally not be okay with it. Like, you would totally just be completely pissed off about it. And it is what it is. So, yeah, about religions being sort of, religious organizations being sort of a good place to start. Because you're in a way, you're giving all the credit to this historical figure that may or may not have even existed. I don't know. Um, I mean, is there evidence showing that? Yeah. Is there a lot of, would there be a lot of circumstantial evidence in the scripture? Yes. For people that study the scripture, I think it's something called, if I'm not mistaken, it's Ma'asif or Ma'arif, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not too sure about all this stuff. But if you look into the esoteric knowledge of the scriptures, you can find that there's, clearly a lot of patterns in there. And that there's, sort of, that's these societies, religious societies, right? they have their practices, and they have their tradition, their belief. So this now allows some sort of deflection, if you will. Because, well, this book from, I don't know, however many thousands of years ago says this, or, the historical figure says this, and if you say, well, hey, if so and so wants to go kick their ass or whatever, it's like, well, dude, I mean, they're dead, or, well, not necessarily dead, but they're somewhere else, right? You can't touch them. They are gone. So in that case, I mean, I guess we'll just we have to accept it as is, and it's usually a good place to start. Also, with the sort of what they're looking for as far as, say, an agent, that's where a lot of the agents come from. They come from these kind of organizations. They have a very early sort of understanding of how these exclusive organizations work and operate. And in order to stay within these exclusive organizations, you have to have a consistency. You have to have consistency in that you have to follow their traditions and customs, almost sort of to a point of, I guess you could say, even being autistic. This can involve personal sacrifice. So that'll be about it, and I think that'll do. I think we're done.